Are you doing okay this morning? Good. Did everybody get an email announcement about the sign up for conferences? If you haven't looked at it, please check your email. If you have any problems signing up for the conference, let me know. I put a link in there. If the link doesn't work, you can go on Blackboard, over on the left menu, go to Course Tools, and you have to go all the way to the bottom to Wikis. So I've got it set up in a wiki, and then you just edit the wiki to claim your appointment. Okay. Hopefully you got an email with the new announcement in it. So just to review, next week, we will meet Monday by Zoom. We will do the peer review. I'll be here to answer any questions, and I'll go over some of the things you want to help each other with. You guys will work on peer reviewing by emailing it back and forth. Excuse me. And then the rest of the week, I'll be conferencing with you one-on-one over Zoom, okay, according to the appointment that you sign up. Anybody have any questions about that? Good so far? All right. Then let's review a little bit about what we talked about yesterday about the logical fallacies. So what is black and white fallacy?
Oh, do you ever participate in this? Or do you just listen? And just do the assignment? Is this the one you got the paper due? Are you still hurting? Okay, well, you have to wake up so we can go.
Come on, someone, anyone. Gavin, what is black and white fallacy? Were you here yesterday? You were, weren't you? Ryan? Also, I'll give you a hint, either or fallacy. Another thing is called, or false dilemma. Yeah, thanks, Robert. Basically, they only give you two choices, and usually they set theirs up to be, you know, the best case scenario, and the other one to be the worst case scenario that they don't want you to choose. When really the truth is there are many, many choices in between. There isn't just this choice or this choice. It's not just America, love it or leave it. There are lots of choices in between then. People who love America but still want to improve it, right? So be careful when they're setting up an argument that only offers you two choices and theirs looks like the more attractive one. You have to always ask yourself, are these really the only two choices that we have? Okay. So what else did we look at yesterday in terms of fallacies? Remember this one? What is straw man? Caleb, what was straw man? Jacoby, do you remember straw man? Okay. Yeah, you guys are getting there. It distorts the other side's argument, right? So it takes the other side's argument, and like Robert says, you can either water it down or you can make it sound extreme. So in the video yesterday, he's like, news programs should be careful about like pictures and images that are violent that they broadcast. And the other side distorted that argument as total censorship. Instead of taking the real argument, the legitimate argument, which is they should use judgment about what they broadcast, the other side was like, oh, well, you're saying that, we should censor everything. That was not the argument. That was an extreme version of the argument that was easier to knock down than the actual argument he was proposing. Okay. So yeah, you'll see that occasionally on the news too, where they'll distort someone's argument to the point that it's, portrayed as something ridiculous and not at all what the person was arguing, right? We all have to give up our cars in order to prevent global warming, instead of dealing with something like reducing emissions or electric cars or something like that. They distort the other side to make it seem like the worst case scenario. Okay, good. Ad hominem, we had already talked about quite a bit, although that was in the video, right? Attacking the person as your argument instead of actually making an argument, right? So let's see. Oh yeah, what about authority fallacy? What is a false authority fallacy? I just saw this one actually this morning. I tried to find it so I could show you guys, but I lost it. What would make an authority false? Emma, what would make an authority a false authority? Yeah, both of these are true. You read an article and think you're an expert on the topic, or someone who has sort of an adjacent expertise or maybe in a similar field. So, for example, I think the president's advisor, Peter Navarro, was advocating for the hydroxychloroquine medicine that they've been talking about as a possible treatment for the virus. And somebody asked him what his qualification was to recommend this medically, and he said he was a social scientist, which is not exactly a medical scientist, right? Which means the logic is, you're saying because of my expertise, I can recommend this. If your expertise really isn't in that area. So the example I saw this morning as I was just going through was on Facebook, and somebody posted a doctor in, I think, O'Fallon, Missouri, who was, again, advocating for this medicine, and he had pulled up a report from a doctor out in California who said he treated the patients and they were walking out just a couple of days later all better after they had the medicine, right? Now, first, this goes back to one of the logical fallacies we've already talked about, which is hasty generalization, right? So maybe that gentleman's patients did respond well to the treatment, but just basing it on those few patients is not enough to say it's going to benefit all patients without a wider study. It might, and that's the tricky part. It could be true, but just basing it on a few cases is what we call anecdotal evidence, and it's not enough without a controlled study to prove that it actually does work in the large majority of people. Okay, so he's broadcasting his views on how the medicine works and everything. And I'm not sure about this, but somebody then popped up and said, but he's a chiropractor, which is not really in the field of medicine that is about treating viruses, right? So I would consider, if that's true, because I didn't get to check it out before I ran out of time, then that would be a case of false authority, because his field really isn't in the field of treating viruses, right? He doesn't really have the expertise in that area to be advocating the position. I mean, you can talk about it as a general person and what your opinion is, but when you set yourself up as an authority, it's a little bit trickier. What about no true Scotsman? That fallacy. No true Scotsman would do that. They would not commit that act of violence. How does that not logically play out? That's not a true video game because it doesn't have clear goals and a winning setup. Mary, what do you think? Somebody want, yeah. You ignore any flaws that might have in the argument. Well, basically, you refuse to address the argument by excluding it. So, like, somebody commits bad behavior in a group you're familiar with or that you identify with or defend. So, let's say a feminist says something terrible about, all men should be shot or something like that. And there are always fringe elements out there. But then the argument, instead of addressing the bad behavior or condemning it, would say, well, no true feminist would do that. Okay? which means you don't have to address the argument at all. You're like, it's not a part of my group, so I don't have to deal with it, right? So no true Republican, no true Democrat, no true whatever it is. Someone presents you with an argument about someone, doing something and espousing a philosophy, and instead of dealing with bad actors or fringe elements in your group, you're basically like, oh no, they're not part of us. I don't have to deal with that. Whereas, we all know that there are elements and movements and groups that are extreme that can cause harm to a group, and they should be addressed. I guess the best parallel would be, I don't know if you guys are aware that Bernie Sanders, when he was campaigning, a lot of people were complaining about his supporters basically bullying people on the internet. So if he had, if people were responding, well, he's not or she's not a real Bernie supporter if they're acting like that. So instead of addressing the behavior, they're just like, no, they're not us. We're not responsible for it. We don't have to worry about it. Not our problem. Does anybody have any other questions about those? I will be asking you about fallacies on the final exam. So make sure, and I'm not so much concerned that you remember it's called ad hominem or post hoc ergo propter hoc. Remember the cause and effect fallacy. But then you can explain what the argument is. So for post hoc, when someone argues that just the order of events means that one event caused the second event, that you can explain the bad logic is what I'm worried about. Okay. And that you can recognize when somebody's trying to use one of those arguments on you. All right, I'd like to do a little bit of practicing on the paraphrase since you guys are heading into your first draft for Monday. So let's look, we did one the other day when we were talking about paraphrasing. So just a little refresher. Let me share my screen and look at another example. Okay, so you're going to need either access to your computer and keyboard to type, or your paper and pencil if you prefer to do it longhand. So if you remember, we did this first one where Jacques Cousteau was talking about how the Antarctic influences weather on our planet. So now we're going to head to the second one, and we're going to practice a couple of these to make sure you guys are getting comfortable with the concept of putting things into your own words and still citing them. So a few things that you want to remember, use a signal phrase, right? So remember all those verbs we talked about, according to Jacques Cousteau, or Jacques Cousteau points out, or Jacques Cousteau underscores the, idea, whatever it is, and then you put in your own words what he or she said, right? And you use synonyms, words that mean the same thing where you can. Now, if there's not a good synonym, you can use a word from the original, but you don't want it to sound too much like an echo, right? So there's some basic ideas here in number 2. The 20s were the years when drinking was against the law, and the law was a bad joke because everyone knew a local bar where liquor could be had. Okay? There were years when organized crime ruled the cities, the police seemed powerless to do anything against it. Classical music was forgotten while jazz spread throughout the land, and men like Peter Beck, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie became the heroes of the young. The flapper was born in the 20s, and her bobbed hair and short skirts, she symbolized perhaps more than anyone or anything else, America's break with the past. Okay? And so this is from Kathleen Yancey, so practice good habits with your in-text citations. So you would put her name at the end, Yancey. This is the page number here, 25. So let's try it out. We'll break it down, and then everybody will put their version in the chat, and we will compare them. And, there will be different versions, and they can still be accurate, but how would you put each idea? Okay. So start working on that. And let me know if you have questions. You can just chat me if you're trying to figure something out. actually gonna paste this in the chat so I can see the chat at the same time. Stop sharing my screen here. Here's a link if you want to pull it up on the another screen. Remember, it's just a first draft, so don't stress about it too much. When you're finished, go ahead and put your paraphrase into the chat and we'll start comparing them in a few minutes. Go ahead and put what you have in the chat so we have time to discuss part of it. Okay, good. I like that. Kathleen Yancey states prohibition began in the 1920s. The law was not enforced well because of known bars nearby. You might just put they served known bars that served alcohol nearby. That's good. Crime took over and the police force held little capability. I think it'd be okay to put organized crime just because that has a specific connotation, because otherwise it could be random crime. And so we want to keep to what they're saying, but that looks good. The police force held little capability is a little bit vague. See, what can we do with it? Police weren't able to stop them, something like that. People began to bring jazz into their lives and leaving classical behind. Flappers came along to enter the past. Be a little bit more specific about that. You're headed in the right direction. You guys don't necessarily have to put the English 102 supplement in there, but I like the signal phrases. Okay, I like this section, Mary, yeah. Oh, that looks good, Alexis. That's the next one. Jazz replaced classical music. Very good. So she separated that into 2 sentences, which is something that you can do in order to change up the pattern of it. Some of the famous jazz musicians were, and Flatbury was born in the 20s. They had bobbed hair and short skirts. You might find a different one for symbolized. She represented America's break with the past, you know. You guys are definitely on the right track. Yeah, Robert, for the end, you can use the in-text citation, which would abbreviate the title. Put that in parentheses at the end. Good, Julian. Classical music fell out of popularity, yes. Okay, yeah, I like that. I think you've got all the ideas in there. It just takes some practice. You make sure you include all the ideas. Don't add anything to it. If you want to comment on what your source is saying, wait until you've done, the paraphrase first. And then you can say, this means, this indicates, the implications are, right? You guys are doing a good job with the signal phrases. Don't forget those in your drafts. Okay. So for tomorrow, I'd like you to bring me 3 examples of logical fallacies that you find on the news, in politics, in pop culture. Okay. So tomorrow, 3 examples of one of the logical fallacies we've talked about. It should be a different one, not 3 of the same one. So pick 3 of them that we've talked about. And make sure to finish your annotated bibliography, okay? I'll be online for a couple hours after if anybody wants to email me. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow.